Mathematicians. Today we're going to be learning about whole numbers, more specifically how to divide by one-digit numbers with a remainder. In this video, we're going to be writing out our remainder as a decimal. So to start us off, we have 31 divided by 2. Now we know that 2 doesn't go into 31 evenly because 31 is not an even number. And so we're going to set up our long division to see what we end up getting. On the inside, we have 31 because 31 is our dividend, and on the outside, we have 2 because 2 is our divisor. Because 2 is a one-digit number, we're going to see how many times it goes into our first digit, which is 3. So 2 goes into 3 one time because 2 times 1 is equal to 2, and that's as close as we could get to 3 without passing it. And so we're going to write down our digit 2. And then we're going to take these two values, the 3 and the 2, and subtract them. 3 minus 2 is equal to 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring down our next digit, which is also 1. And when we bring it down, we have 11. So now we need to see how many times does 2 go into 11. And the answer to that is 5, because 2 times 5 is equal to 10, and that's as close as we can get without passing 11. And so we're going to write down our 10, and we're going to subtract our two values. 11 minus 10 is equal to 1, and notice here that we have a remainder of 1. What we can do is, after the 31, we can add a decimal and a 0, because that doesn't change the value of 31, but we want to see what decimal we could get if we continue dividing. All right? So because we added a decimal after the 1, we do have to add a decimal on top as well. So now we're going to get our decimal answer because 2 doesn't go into 31 evenly, but we're going to see what the remainder is in decimal form. So we're going to bring down the 0, and we're going to have a 10 here. And now 2 goes into 10 5 times because 2 times 5 is equal to 10. And so we're going to write down our 10 and subtract these two values. 10 minus 10 is equal to 0. And so we end up getting our decimal answer, which is 15 and 5/10. So 2 doesn't go into 31 evenly, but if we add a decimal place and a 0, we can see what fraction goes into it. All right? And then we end up with our decimal by doing this. So now we have 243 divided by 5. And we're going to set up our long division. We know that 5 is not going to go into this number evenly, but we're going to figure out what our decimal will be. So 243 goes on the inside because it's our dividend, and 5 goes on the outside because it's our divisor. To start us off, we need to see how many times does 5 go into 2? And the answer to that is 0. I don't have to add a 0 there because it won't be a significant value since it's in the beginning, so I could just move on to my next digit and see how many times does 5 go into 24. Now 5 goes into 24 4 times because 5 times 4 is equal to 20. And so we're going to write down our 20 and subtract our two values here. 24 minus 20 is equal to 4. Then we're going to bring down our next digit, which is 3. And so we need to see how many times 5 goes into 43. And 5 goes into 43 8 times because 5 times 8 is equal to 40. I'm going to write down our 40 and subtract these two values. 43 minus 40 is 3. And what we're going to do now, since we have a remainder, is we're going to add a decimal place. We're going to add a decimal and a 0 after 243 because this does not change the value of it, but it lets us see what our decimal answer will be since 5 doesn't go into 243 evenly. And so I also have to write a decimal on top as well, don't forget that. And now I'm going to bring down the 0. Now 5 goes into 30 6 times because 5 times 6 is equal to 30. So we could write down our 30 and subtract these two values. We end up getting a 0, so we have no remainder left over because When we do 243 divided by 5, we get 48 and 6/10. Okay? And now off to our final example. So we have 6,623 divided by 3. Our dividend goes on the inside and our divisor goes on the outside. Now we need to see how many times 3 goes into 6, which is 2 times, because 3 times 2 is equal to 6. So we write down our 6 and we subtract our values. 6 minus 6 is 0, so we're going to bring down our next value, which is also 6. And so we need to see how many times does 3 go into 6. Now we know that's 2 because 3 times 2 is equal to 6. So we write down our 6 and we're going to subtract these values as well. 6 minus 6 is 0. So we're going to bring down our next value, which is 2. Now 3 does not go into 2, so what we're going to do is we're going to add our 0 on top, because 3 times 0 is 0 and we can't get closer to that without passing 2. And so we're going to write down our 0 and subtract. 2 minus 0 is 2, and then we bring down our next value, which is 3. And so we get 23. Now 3 goes into 23 7 times, because 3 times 7 is equal to 21. And that's as close as we can get without passing 23. And so we're going to write down our 21 and subtract these two values. 23 minus 21 is 2, so we have a remainder of 2. But we're going to add our decimal and a 0 and add our decimal on top as well. And we're going to bring down our 0. And so we're going to see how many times does 3 go into 20. So 3 goes into 20 6 times, because 3 times 6 is equal to 18. And so we're going to write down our 18 and subtract these two values. 20 minus 18 is 2. And so we're going to add another 0 and bring it down to see if we could get a more exact answer. We get 20 again, and 3 goes into 20 6 times, because 3 times 6 is equal to 18. And so we're going to subtract by 18 again, and we get 2 again. If you notice, this pattern is going to continue happening because we're going to end up with a repeating decimal. All right, it's going to be 2,207, and it's going to go 0.66666, and so on. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to stop here, since we now know it's a repeating decimal, and write it out like this. So we have 2,207.6. Notice that there's a bar on top of it, and this bar means that the 6 is just going to continue repeating. All right? So that's it.